Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Mary Price. I'm the Events and Marketing Director at the Shingo Institute at Utah State University. Today, I'm excited to have two special guests with us, Ken Snyder, who is the Executive Director at the Shingo Institute, and Josh Howell, who is the President of the Lean Enterprise Institute. Today, we'll be sharing information about the Future of People at Work Symposium, which is scheduled for July 18th and 19th in Detroit, Michigan. You can learn more about the event at shingo.org/events. We also published a short article in our newsletter that went out yesterday. If you don't subscribe to the newsletter, I would encourage you to do so. Just visit shingo.org and click the gold button at the top of the page. With that, Ken, I'll turn the time over to you.
Thanks. So probably wondering what we've gathered to talk about when we talk about the future of people at work. I'm going to go back a few years and talk about the first time I got invited to reimagine or rethink or whatever lean. And one of the leaders that I know reached out and said, Ken, we want to get a group of people together and rethink lean. Then a couple of years later, another leader I know reached out and said, Ken, I want to do lean reimagined. Would you join our effort? And then there was another one, Lean for the 21st Century, and there've been a few others. And I think there's a certain amount of frustration within our community. I think many like me got into lean not just because it was a good way of doing things, but because there was a part of us that wanted to see the world change and get the workplace into a better place for people to work at. And I've been inspired by, I'm going to share a slide, and I think this is probably the only slide that we're going to share today. But I've said this in many different ways, something similar to this in many different ways over the years, but I ran across this quote by Paul O'Neill, and since he's smarter and more famous than I am, I thought I'll just borrow his language and continue to use it. But I believe sincerely that every person on this planet deserves the opportunity to do work they find meaningful. And what we do at what I am motivated by at the Shingo Institute is to do that. But unfortunately, the vast majority of people are not being reached by the lean community. And we want to be able to do that. And I've realized at the Shingo Institute, we can't do that alone. We need, in order to reach out and make the pie bigger, right now, I would say we reach thousands and thousands of people. But what we really want to do is reach millions and millions and maybe even a few billions if we can, but try to make it a better place for everybody. And the only way I think we can do that is by working together as a lean community and not each pursuing just our own specific interests at any given time. So I've joined this effort, and a little over a year ago, Josh reached out to us and tried to bring together some of these different things that are going on. And he reached out to us at the Shingo Institute and a few others to kind of form a steering committee to talk about how can we reach the millions and millions of people who would benefit from knowing more and having better practices around lean management. So I'm going to turn it over to Josh to talk about where we're at with that effort and the symposium that LEI is planning that we're participating in. So Josh, take it away.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Shingo community, for the opportunity to join you this afternoon on this webinar. I'm coming to you from mere feet away from a manufacturing gemba here in Kalamazoo, Michigan, just a bit north of where I grew up in South Bend, Indiana. Anyway, the magic of technology enables us to connect here this afternoon, and I couldn't be more thrilled. So a few things that I guess you introduced there, Ken, that I'll kind of pick up on. So for those who perhaps don't know me, my name is Josh Howell. I lead the Lean Enterprise Institute based out of Boston, Mass, a nonprofit dedicated to lean, much like, and just improvement, kind of general, much like the Shingo Institute. And it was just a couple of years ago that LEI was celebrating its 25-year anniversary, and having a conversation sort of looking ahead. So wonderful that, we've done what we've done over the past 25 years, accomplished what we've accomplished. The lean movement has grown considerably over those 2.5 decades. But really the sort of more pressing question is, what will the next 25 years look like? And kind of what will be our work to meet the challenges, to solve the problems that need to be sort of solved for the next 2.5 decades. And one of the things I think, Ken, you just spoke to it, but certainly a point where we are in violent agreement is that we would hope for the next 25 years to reach more folks with these ideas, to have many more lean practitioners out there benefiting their organizations, adding value to their colleagues and their customers and their organizations writ large than we've seen over the past 25 years. I think we agree on that kind of overarching goal. The fact of the matter is, when we look at sort of the state of play today, there remain many folks that are still kind of unaware of these kind of fundamental ideas and how they would benefit them and how they apply to their day-to-day work or how they apply to their organization's challenges. In addition to that, there's folks out there that, based on what they've kind of had exposure to, aren't fully informed, let's say, about kind of the full suite of ideas that kind of comprise the lean body of knowledge. So there are these gaps, and I think if our overarching goal for the next 25 years is to reach more people, it would probably help to begin with some kind of reflection and analysis as to why those gaps exist today and what might we do differently going forward to close those gaps into the future and really achieve that goal of expanding the community, growing the community, putting these powerful ideas into the hands of more people than is the case today. And so, thinking to this, so there have been a series of conversations. Ken, you and I have participated in a few of those over the last year or so, kind of exploring this overarching question, thinking together about how we might kind of double down on our efforts, expand our outreach, equip more people with these ideas. And that led us to this idea for a symposium, for a joint event put on by organizations such as my own, such as yours, Ken, the Shingo Institute, and 4 other organizations, including Toyota's TSSC group, that we're calling the Future of People at Work Symposium. And I guess the basic idea, kind of the fundamental idea for this event, and then we can get into some of the more specifics through our conversation, Ken, but if lean helps people kind of meet their goals, address their challenges, and it does that by enabling them to solve problems and improve and innovate in their work, then the question for us, I think, one question for us is, how is lean kind of keeping up with advancements or fundamental changes in the work people do, in the means they use to improve that work, and in the way they learn how to do and improve their work. All those things are being impacted by some forces of disruption, if you will. And so really the purpose of this symposium is to bring people together to kind of educate all of us, to learn more from one another and from some folks that have information that perhaps you and I don't have, to better understand what's changing. What are these emergent technologies, let's say? What are these other emergent forces that are kind of fundamentally changing the work that people do and the way that they improve their work? And through kind of, let's say, getting better educated about that, we'll then kind of minimally structure and lightly facilitate some process by which we can kind of digest that information, digest that new learning, and think together about what we might do differently to ensure that lean continues to, as I've been saying, keep up with the times. The times are changing. So the question is, how might kind of lean, at least in its methods and practices, how might lean need to adapt and evolve along with those fundamental changes in the work to ensure that these ideas are sought after, right? That they're highly effective for what people need them for, to meet their goals, to address their challenges, to solve their problems. So anyway, essentially that's what we are looking forward to doing in a couple of months as part of the symposium.
Let me make just a few comments on that, if that's all right, Josh.
Please.
I think we've all recognized that, and I've heard this phrase over and over again, and I I don't particularly like it, but it does describe the world we're living in right now. But it's a VUCA world. It's volatile. The volatility is getting worse. It's uncertain. That's the U. It is complex, and it is ambiguous. There's more things that we don't know, and there's more things that we need to know. The complexity is the more things we need to know. The ambiguous is the more things we don't know. Like what's the impact of new technologies such as AI? What's that going to bring to the workplace? In terms of volatility, we're seeing wars. We haven't had significant wars happening in the developed world for a long time, but now we're seeing things like that, and economic volatility, swings up, down, everywhere else. And I think it's only going to get worse in terms of a VUCA world. And as I look at the quest to reach millions and millions of people in their workplaces, I think that there's the opportunity for those who adopt lean practices and the Shingo principles and so on to outperform. And we've seen that happen time and time again, that they outperform the competition. And that's a way for us to be able to reach the millions and millions, is if we work together to market it as a joint body, as opposed to each of us kind of doing our own thing just alone. And that's one reason, I think we all get better together, so to speak. And I think we can reach out better when we're together with a common message. And we do find I think we've hesitated in the past because of potential competitive interests. And I'll bring that out there, but
Sure.
But what I find in working with, and I'll just use the example of the 6 of us that have got together for this symposium, our competitive interests are much smaller than our complementary interests. And so I think, I've said this in the one-on-one, the meetings we've had as a group, sometimes collaboration is messy because, who's in charge and who decides what is sometimes difficult to determine. But working together, I believe that we can reach the millions and millions who can benefit from this. And I bring out the problems in the world because the world is crying for better solutions, faster solutions, improved workplaces, so that the people can do that more quickly. And so I think that the need for this is going to be increasing. The opportunities are going to be increasing. And as a group, I think we can respond more positively to that and help grow the movement, so to speak.
I'd go so far as to say, Ken, perhaps we ourselves, as a group of 6 organizations coming together to collaborate to put on this event jointly, I'd say we ourselves perhaps are a case study in the future of collaborative work.
There's a couple of questions I think that have come up. Do you want to tackle those, or do you want to talk a little bit about the symposium and what the agenda is?
Well, so I think maybe the first question that I caught, interested in the topic of remote lean, will be addressed at the symposium now that many organizations are delivering design remotely or hybrid. Maybe I'll cue off on that question to talk a little bit about some of the kind of aspects of work that we recognize are changing and that we intend to cover as part of the program, so to speak, or part of the couple of days when we'll bring people together. So I wrote down here a list, I guess, of about kind of 6, again, aspects of work that we recognize are changing. It does include the notion of kind of remote work. So let me just kind of rattle these off, and then Ken, perhaps there's some comments that you want to make about that.
Mm-hmm.
One would be, trends we see from the US perspective. I'll say positive trends we see in companies deciding to make things in the US. Now that can take the form of kind of reshoring, manufacturing perhaps, or customer service operations, or in the case of, let's say, a startup, that could just simply look like deciding not to offshore that operation or that production system in the first place. So that's one kind of area that we intend to dig into. Another would be sort of the emergence of various technologies. Of course, the one that captures all the headlines these days and upsets Scarlett Johansson, it turns out, would be artificial intelligence, generative AI, kind of specifically. but we don't want to lose sight of other emergent technologies like augmented reality, virtual reality, just advancements in robotics and whatnot. So again, that'll be a topic that we intend to provide some folks that probably have more knowledge about these technologies than certainly I would, or perhaps many of the folks in the audience, to kind of educate us on those things so that we can wrestle with the implications of those technologies for the work that we do, for the work that the folks we support do, and for the work that we all do as kind of problem solvers. So that's sort of a second one. A third is the emergence of, I'll call it like more competitiveness in the workplace or in the work experience. So organizations are challenged often to kind of retain the talent that they bring into the organizations. And that talent may go work for another organization. And so we've got to kind of compete, not just in terms of pay, but in terms of just the work experience and the support that's provided to individuals working within the organization. But there's also the competition of folks going to kind of work independently for themselves, have that kind of entrepreneurial experience. And so, as management, we can consider how do we create a work experience that taps into some of those same kind of benefits that one might get if they strike out on their own, with the benefits that also come along with an organization. So that's maybe a third topic. A fourth would be, I'll put it in the vein of collaboration and teamwork. That could be challenging when done in kind of a remote context. It can also be challenging when done in a hybrid context. And frankly, it can be challenging when done in person. It's not like all of us were super effective at collaborating or in working as a team in 2019. And it's only because of the pandemic that we're struggling with it like we are today. This is hard. Collaboration is hard, whether done through a Zoom screen or in the same room with colleagues. And so similarly, to look at, some of the advancements in technology that are affecting how people collaborate and work together, and whether you're sort of a manager responsible for a team and how that team works effectively together, or a member of the team whose only interactions is with your house cat, and yet really who you need to interact with is your colleagues and others in your organization to deal with some of the gnarly problems that you're responsible for. That's hard too. So whether you're leading the team or just a member of the team, especially in a distributed context, can be extremely challenging. So we intend to, again, kind of learn more about what's emerging in that space and then think through how we can address those challenges. Two more. One would be changes in the way that education and training is provided. Some of that might be changes enabled by technology that we intend to get into. And then finally, especially with multi-site, large organizations, many of which are international, we recognize ongoing challenges to, for lack of a better phrase, like spread goodness. When goodness emerges in a site that's one of many sites in a company or an enterprise, that challenge of kind of taking that goodness, bottling it up somehow, and disseminating that to other sites, we recognize is a huge challenge too. So those are, I guess, some of the list of challenges that we're in the process of identifying folks that have good kind of perspective and experience on those challenges to share that with us. And then, like I mentioned before, through minimally structured and lightly facilitated kind of collaborative sessions, we'll think through those things together and generate some ideas for what we can kind of do about it, and perhaps even hatch some plans for what we can do about it collectively, whether that's the 6 organizations putting on the event, or all of the folks that will attend and be there with us. We look forward to what happens, honestly, almost more excited about what happens post-symposium than what will happen in the symposium itself. But anyway,
let me tackle it. Yeah, so one of the questions that was asked is about how to expand this initiative internationally. Thank you, Marco, for asking that. But let me just kind of pick up a little bit of what you said with your last of the 6 points. I don't think it's just the international companies, although that's a lot of what we see right now that are adopting lean are multinationals who have a very broad distribution around the globe. And there's a lot that we can learn from them. So that's absolutely right. But there's also a lot that we can learn from what's happening in those other countries. And there's best practices of how government interacts with business that we could learn from in the States and vice versa. And so I think looking at the international adoption of these best practices is a better way of a way of us getting better together. It will be hard for any specific area, geography, if you will, or any specific industry to get better alone. If you look at it from an industry point of view, if they try to get better without their supply chain and their customers being involved with it, they're only going to get so far. And also, if same is true for looking at it from an international perspective for one organization, one enterprise. You can only get so good in one place. So you've got to figure out how to bring up everybody to a high level of performance. So that's got to be a big part of what we do. We learn a lot, for example, at the Shingo Institute from the high adoption rate in Ireland. And some of the things that are happening there are things that I think would be beneficial for the rest of the world to adopt, not just the States.
Can we take the next question? Bonnie's question about types of participants. Hi, Bonnie. Good to see you there in the Q&A. So there's, I guess, three kind of groups or types of participants that we've primarily had in mind in designing this and organizing it. The first would be business leaders, folks responsible for their teams or organizations who are kind of leading the charge in evolving and adapting to a changing circumstance. So it would be sort of one group, business leaders, I'll call it. Second would be folks in academia who will be instrumental in churning out workers of the future with hopefully the required skills and knowledge to do the work that folks will be doing at that time. It will be different than the work that folks are doing today. Perhaps, you know, it'll be nothing more than prompt engineering in concert with your ChatGPT. I'm not sure, but in any case, folks in academia would be another kind of group. And then finally, I'll call it the category of like improvement professionals. So whether that's folks that support organizations from, I guess, an external perspective, or folks that are internal to an organization, but really their job is to support you know, building capability with Lean throughout the organization, helping to support the organization to tackle gnarlier problems than perhaps are practical to tackle in kind of the day-to-day. So anyway, so improvement professionals would be, I guess, kind of the third group. And quite frankly, we're excited to see those three groups kind of intermix and kind of co-learn together from those different perspectives to really make the conversation as rich as it has the potential to be. So I think that's how I'd answer your question, Bonnie.
And I'm just going to make one more comment. I've made this to you before, Josh. That is, the younger the better. There's too many old white guys like me who have been doing this for too long, maybe. But it would be great to get opinions from people whose future we're talking about. And then the question I would like to ask of them is, what can we do, those of us who are in positions of influence, what can we do to make the world better for you? And I would like to have those people in the room having that discussion with us and letting us know what we can do to make the world better. So I'll just kind of open it up. It's not just CEOs and executive directors and so on that we're looking for. We're looking for those who are interested in building a better future. I'll tackle the next one. Peter, it's good to see. Thanks for your participation. You're one of the people that I think is going to be joining us on this one in some way, shape, or form, I would guess. But some good questions. We did debate amongst ourselves, and when I say Lean is, or collaboration is messy, Lean is one topic that we had a messy discussion about, whether or not we should just stop using it. And you notice we managed to not use it in the title of the symposium. That is very intentional. And why did we choose not to do it is because of everything you just said. Lean gets a bad rap because it's often tied to cutting employees or losing weight and going to the gym. When talking to people outside of the Shingo community, I have never used the term Lean unless I have used it in the context of quoting alongside it the definition that's provided in the Machine That Changed the World book, you know, the definition early on in that book. because of the reasons why you cite that it's often just misused or confused or abused or whatever. So yes, we don't want to use the term lean, especially if we're going to be reaching out to a much broader community. And that we think we need to have better words like improvement and excellence, quality, those sorts of things that we're talking about. Second question, think about agile has come to the mainstream. I would just make a comment. Agile reminds me of me trying to do what I called Kaizen. I was working in a Japanese company in the 1980s, and we just called everything Kaizen and had a kind of a universal word for any kind of quality event or productivity event. We just called it Kaizen. I'm used to having that be part of it. What we struggled with early on was understanding why we should do this or why we should do that, or what was it about this that worked or what didn't work. And I really am, when the Shingo Institute, this is right before I got involved with the Institute, but when they introduced the guiding principles, to me, that was a big revelation. A lot of those are things that I had learned, but I had learned them the hard way by violating certain aspects of them and then realizing there was a better way. So I learned from trial and error, not necessarily from the teaching of principles. And I think, at least I hope, that has made the improvement process much better. And with that said, what I see missing in a lot of Agile, at least the people that I talk to, and I've talked to dozens and dozens, is very little is being driven by principles. A lot is being driven by process, and just process without the principles to guide it. And your third question about relationships with higher ed, I think we're getting better at that as we have re-energized the whole LEAN group. We've let it falter during the pandemic a little bit. We need to re-energize. Luckily, the research side is going really well. We are seeing a resurgence in original academic research, which has been wonderful to see. And particularly in fields where it's needed the most, and I will give specifically in healthcare, where there's been just some outstanding research done applying lean in healthcare. So with that, I will say we need to do a better job of educating upstream, but that's something that we're actually fairly good at collaborating on, and we've been doing it for years. We just need to get it back together again since the pandemic kind of shut us down. But hopefully that gives a little bit of answer to your questions there, Peter.
Yeah, on that topic of higher education, I guess I'll just add briefly that there are a number of academics from institutions, universities, and whatnot that are educating on various aspects of improvement or lean that will be attending the symposium. So even I think the opportunity to kind of interact and build out that community and the sort of the industry academia partnerships that are out there, the symposium will provide some opportunity to advance kind of the ball in some of those spaces. Perhaps I'll address Selena's comment. Thank you, Selena, for the question. So as Ken just mentioned, in naming this event, by design, we chose not to include the term lean, or for that matter, agile, or for that matter, Six Sigma, or for that matter, design thinking, or for that matter, I don't know, sort of insert your kind of improvement methodology or set of ideas here. We purposely chose not to do that. The focus of our discussions will be on work, what's changing about work, what's changing about how to improve work, and what's changing about how to learn to improve work, to do and improve work. And there are various means by which people do that. Some of that might be drawing from what we would think of as the lean body of knowledge. Some of that might be drawing from the Shingo principles that Ken just mentioned, or the Six Sigma kind of toolkit or whatnot. We're approaching this event and entering into the discussion kind of methodology agnostic, if you will. We really want to squarely focus on the work that people do day in and day out to create value for their customers, to achieve flow, to improve quality, to do all that kind of stuff. And then talk about how generally we can support those folks to be more successful in that kind of going forward, drawing from whatever experience or toolkit or set of ideas we might draw from that kind of helps to get the job done effectively. So I don't know that we'll have the direct question that you're kind of referencing in your question. But I also wouldn't be surprised if to some degree that gets covered as an outgrowth of some of the conversations that I've just described. But thanks for the question. It's great.
So we're coming to a close, and so I don't think we have time to address the remaining questions. Sorry about that, but thank you for the questions and for your comments. That's been great to see your participation. I would say that we want to encourage anybody that is interested in joining this conversation. The symposium, that is what the purpose of the symposium is. So we welcome any and all who want to join the conversation about what kind of future do we want to build. I think we're going to be offering, and I'm opening the door here for you, Josh. I think we'll be offering those who participate in this webinar a special discount code. So Josh, can you speak to that, since you're the host of the symposium, and what we might what that
Sure.
might mean?
Yep. So next week, sometime, you can expect to hear from us, those that, as Ken just said, participate in the webinar or signed up for it, about some kind of discounting that we'll offer to ensure that really we fill the room with the right people, with the folks that want to participate in this learning and in this conversation. We want to remove any barriers that may exist to your participation in that conversation. We want you to contribute. We want to hear from you. We want to be connected so that post-symposium we can get after it. All that good stuff. So anyway, next week would be the timing to hear some updates on pricing that perhaps can enable more folks to join and contribute than would otherwise be in a position to do.
And Josh, let me just express my thanks for joining us and hosting this symposium and joining us on this webinar. Appreciate your participation and looking forward to seeing you in July, if not before.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Thanks for the opportunity. Great to see you, Mary. Great to see you, Ken. Thanks for everybody who joined us.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.